So today we're going to be talking about World War II and the early stages before the start of World War II, and the middle of it. So in 1933, Hitler rises to power. He becomes Chancellor of Germany. Now this is a huge deal because the Nazi Party had been a minority party for the longest time. During this time, the Nazi Party had advocated over and over and over again to try to change Germany to make it a new nation, and swept out from the old. Now, if you know, during this point, Germany had lost World War One, and at that point they were paying reparations, which it was going fine in the 20s. In the 1920s, during the Roaring Twenties era, as was commonly referred, the economy was booming, everything was doing great. So the Nazi Party really struggled at this point, trying to get the resources they need for Germany to be able to mobilize their party to become something more than they were. And so for the longest time, Hitler had constantly been trying to advocate, trying to make a new Germany, and he just wasn't able to do it because the German people didn't need any change because the economy was being funded by America to Germany and whatnot, so they were able to pay their debts, so everything was getting a little bit better for the time being. Anyways, it was just for a little bit. So by the early 30s comes around, then you see the Great Depression come around the country, the United States. Then they can't pay Germany their reparations. This causes Germany to go in a financial crisis like no one's ever seen. A lot of the banknotes were completely worthless. The German money that was there was useless. One of the famous photos was a man that had a wheelbarrow full of money that was just worthless. The currency had completely collapsed during this point. And that photo could have been in America too. I can't remember for sure what country it was. So you see now in 1933, Hitler has got the masses to change, to really want that change of Germany. His idealism that he could change them and he could make Germany a better place, and also to get away from the wounds of World War One. After World War One, the German people were very resentful of how they were dealt in the peace conferences. So Hitler gets elected chancellor in 1933. In 1936, you see Hitler has rose to power, and he's building Germany to be exactly what he wants. So he's funding a lot of these campaigns and whatnot, getting people back to work. So a lot of people were unemployed at that point, but when Hitler rose to power, he immediately gave them things to do because he was building a military industry. There were people putting in factories making all sorts of things, ammunition. They would have programs that would have them rebuild roads or make new roads, all in an effort to have them to have security of job and to build what he was going to do with his war economy. In 1938, you see the Anschluss of Austria-Hungary and the Anschluss of Czechoslovakia. Anschluss meaning the occupation of those nations. Lebensraum is the term used for living space for Germans. His argument was these were German people. So we see that he starts expanding Germany like it's never been expanded before. At this time also, in the beginning formations of the Axis power, you have Italy. Italy was led by Benito Mussolini by the 30s. Benito Mussolini was a very charismatic man. He was a man that was able to influence a lot of things during that point. He ruled by fear. I lived in Italy for a couple months, and a lot of the older Italians like Mussolini in the sense because they said that he gave them jobs and security in that. Even though he was a cruel dictator and whatnot, a lot of some of the older people think of him highly because he gave them jobs and whatnot, and had them, just like Hitler had done, gave them a purpose to work. A lot of these people didn't have jobs because the economy had crashed and whatever not. So Benito Mussolini came in and gave them a promise of a life. So Benito Mussolini is there, and his ambitions is really to make a restoration of the Roman Empire. So he's expanding his own territory, beginning with the fights in Ethiopia in 36, and trying to expand his own African colonies for the Italians. So you have these two very radical dictators, fascist dictators, beginning with the formation of the Axis powers that we would know, made up of Germany, Italy, and Japan. Japan was trying to expand their own territory into China, declaring war on China and heavily expanding their area of power. During this point, you also have Communist Russia, led by Joseph Stalin. After the collapse of Russia during World War I, you see the formation of after the Tsar had been overthrown by the communists during World War I, they pieced out with the Germany. They pieced out with Germany, and Russia had their land, which they then communist Russia had that land, and they made peace deal with Germany. We don't want to be part of the war. We'll leave you alone. Let us just control all the land we need. And Germany accepted those terms during World War I. So then we have the Communist Party led by Lenin, and Lenin soon after got sick and died, and so there's a power vacuum there. And it was originally Trotsky who was the heir apparent to lead the party, and that didn't work out because Joseph Stalin took over. So Joseph Stalin builds what is at this point by the time 1939, builds the communist Russia, the Soviet Union, into a very powerful base there. Joseph Stalin's very paranoid. He is absolutely terrified he's going to lose power. So he begins persecuting people left and right. Anybody that has any suspicion of anything, they got brutally murdered. This caused a fear culture where no one would want to go against Stalin. As a result of that, a lot of Russians died from the purge and whatnot. Even today, the population of Russia is not even close to what it was back in 1930s, or even the 40s. Is nowhere near that number now because so many people have died from that point during the purges and whatnot, and the population has declined so much from it. So he purges a lot of the generals and whatnot in an effort to have an absolute power base. This will be a problem later in the beginning stages of World War II, when Germany finally does a surprise attack on Russia because the incompetence of the generals and whatnot because of that purge. During this time also, so you have France being a player in this. France is dealing with a communist party in France going on during this time, and they're destroying government that can't get anything done. So it's absolutely deadlocked right now. So by the time 1939 rolls around, when Germany asked for Danzig is a region in Poland. When they asked for Danzig, Poland said no, they declared war. France was not prepared in the slightest. For Great Britain, there was problems within Great Britain after World War I regarding, at that point, the king, who would be next king of England. The heir apparent did not want the throne. He rejected it to marry an American. And so then they had a crisis on who would be the king, and his brother took it during this time. And so they finally had figured that out, but that caused a lot of turmoil for Great Britain at the time. Of course, that king being George VI, who would take over during this point of time as King of England. Of course, at that point, the king was more of a figurative role, but it was a crisis in Great Britain for that time to figure out who would be the king. America at this point in the 1930s was dealing with the Great Depression. Then you see the rise of Roosevelt, who gets elected at that at this time to recover the economy. He puts a lot of plans into place um, to try to recover the economy. So all this is happening all at once during the 30s. Okay, so in 1939, like I said, Germany declares war on Poland. Germany attacks Poland from the west, where Russia attacks the other half. Poland lasts only a month. Now, Germany had, at this point, had invented a new thing that had never been done, which was blitzkrieg, which it was so fast, the mobility of the troops and whatnot, to take over that land, they just couldn't hold out any longer. France had prepared and declared war on Germany at that point, and they had prepared the imaginary line. The imaginary line, where you have the entirety of France, and on the top right of France, they had built a fort line all across there to guard against Germany's attack. It was a very well fortified. But so Germany knew that and knew the casualties would be excessive there and wind up being just like World War I with trench warfare. So what Germany does is they go around the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg and goes clear around them and straight into Paris and capitulates France in no time. This is like a huge shock for Great Britain and for France because they had no idea that they were sorely unprepared for that style of warfare. They were preparing for World War I tactics. So when that happened, France and Great Britain is completely pushed back. They wind up to go into a little place called Dunkirk, which was a small little town in France. That's where the miracle of Dunkirk happens, where all those troops that were there were able to escape from boats. If it hadn't been for that and they would have got annihilated, it would have changed the fate for a lot of things. Germany probably still would have lost, but it probably would have extended the war way more as a result. So we have the collapse of France by 1940 and the establishment of Vichy France. Germany is at an all-time height, now controlling Poland. They made a deal with the Soviet Union to split the other half of Poland. So one half belongs to the Soviet Union, the other half belongs to Germany with the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. Now we see the Hungary being part of it. Italy is expanding their territory at this point too, and it's pretty bleak for most of Europe in the early stages. You have basically Great Britain trying to defend itself and trying to keep its sovereignty. The United States, FDR desperately wanted to be involved, so they started lend-leasing as much supplies as they could at this point to try to aid Great Britain with what they needed to. And for Roosevelt, he wanted to enter the war, but the problem was the American people didn't want to go to war because they knew everything that happened in World War I, and they didn't feel very much in the need of interventionist policy. That all changed, of course, on December 7th, 1941, when Japan had left a surprise attack on the United States Navy and destroying parts of the Navy. After that, the United States immediately joins the war. Japan did that in the effort to try to get the United States Navy more crippled, so that way the United States wouldn't join the war. If they joined the war, their Navy would be they could control the seas and be able to keep what they needed during that time for Japan. It was a gambit. It was a risky gambit, but it didn't pay off in the end. One of the famous quotes from one of the Japanese leaders says, "I fear that we have woken up a great giant," and he was absolutely right. So, in the beginning stages, you're seeing Germany being able to. So you're seeing a lot of German victory, and it's looking very bleak for Europe at this time. Really, Great Britain's left alone to try to fend against itself. And until 1940, the United States was just lend-leasing, and that was it. But the United Kingdom held on during this time, during the beginning stages of World War II. So that's the beginning stages of World War II, and that's the start of what's going to happen, what happened during that point.